Okay, so we'll take a look at some other pieces that have to do with Alexander the Great. So he was the leader of Greece at this time in the late classical, and he was a really inspired leader who is known for his boundless energy and his bravery in battle. Obviously, he was a very warlike leader because he had these huge armies and he was basically taking over large areas of land and invading other territories and making them his own. And ancient sources reveal that Alexander believed that only Lysippos was able to capture his essence in a portrait. So Lysippos was really the only person that was allowed to sculpt the king's image. And the most famous portrait Lysippos ever did of Alexander was a bronze statue that was actually a nude of Alexander holding up a lance and looking at the sky. There was actually an inscription on this same sculpture that said, "I place the earth under my sway, you, O Zeus, keep Olympus." So this famous portrait is lost, but we do have other portraits of Alexander that we can look at. So this is the head of Alexander the Great. This is him when he was younger, probably before he even became king. It was found in Pella in the 3rd century BCE, marble, 1 foot high. And it's actually, Pella is the capital of Macedonia and the birthplace of Alexander. And it shows Alexander's thick hair, his curly hair, which he was very famous for. And it really features these deep set eyes and parted lips. And this is not a copy, and this head really does approximate the young king's portrait at the time. We'll keep moving on. So this is a detail of a lion hunt from Pella, Greece, 330 to 300 BCE. It's a pebble mosaic. It's about 5 feet, 4.5 inches high, and this detail is about 1 inch high, I believe. So this floor mosaic was found in a house in Pella, where Alexander was actually born. And it's a pebble mosaic that consists of small stones of various colors collected from beaches and riverbanks, and then they set that into cement. And this one depicts a lion hunt, and the figure is light and the background is dark in this piece. And it's much like the red figure painting that we saw in a lot of the ceramic pots of the last section of this chapter. So thin strips are actually defining the lines in this piece. So these are the thin strips of lead that are present in this mosaic. And then subtle gradations of yellow, brown, red, black, white, gray, all are used to suggest interior volume. And shading is actually used on the musculature of the hunters and the cloaks that they wear, as well as the lion's body. The Greek term for shading is skiagraphia, which actually translates to shadow painting. And there is a landscape setting, and this mosaic gives us some insight into what Greek panel paintings from this period may have looked like. Unfortunately, I don't have the full piece. I just have the detail, but you can always look it up too on Google Images if you want to take a look at the full thing. So here's another piece. This is called Hades Abducting Persephone, and this is a wall painting, and this is a detail of it from Tomb 1, Virginia, Greece, 336 BCE. It's a fresco, and that's probably why it was able to survive. If this was a panel painting, which would be a painting on wood, because they didn't use canvas back then, but the wood would have deteriorated and we would have lost the painting, so that's probably why this is still around. And it was found in Tomb 1. And it provides valuable information about Macedonian art and about Greek mural painting that was going on during the late classical. And it's a fresco painting, and it's representing Hades, the lord of the underworld, and he's actually abducting Persephone, who is the daughter of Demeter, and Demeter is the goddess of grain. And he holds Persephone in his left arm and steers his racing chariot here with his other hand. And Persephone's garments and her hair are blowing in the wind. So there's a lot of movement here. The heads and the chariot's wheels are in 3/4 view. So you can see the chariot wheel right here. It's in 3/4. So are the heads. And the chariot is in action. And shading is used under Hades' right arm and in Persephone's torso. You can see there's shading here and in his arm here. So they are using like hatch lines to create shading and value in the piece. And so we can really see what the panel paintings of the late classical might have looked like by looking at this wall painting, this fresco wall painting here. So this piece, they think, is maybe done by Philoxenos of Eretria. This is the Battle of Issus. It's a Roman copy. They call it the Alexander mosaic. From the House of the Faun in Pompeii, Italy, 120 to 100 BCE. And it's a copy of a panel painting that was from 333 to 316 BCE, which is the late classical period. So this is made out of tesserae. It's a tessera mosaic, and it's 8 feet 10 inches by 16 by 9 inches. 16 feet 9 inches. So this was found in a late 2nd century Roman house at Pompeii, and it was made using tesserae, which are cubical pieces of glass or stones that are cut to size and shape, very much like a tile. And the subject is really the great battle between the armies of Alexander the Great and the Persian king Darius III. And it probably shows the Battle of Issus, which took place in southeastern Turkey. And this is thought to be a copy of a late 4th century BCE Greek painting. And that's why we're looking at it now, because it was the painting, the original painting was done in the late classical. And we can see some really advanced techniques when we look at this piece. The rearing horse is in 3/4 view. I believe here. And then there's a horse's rump going away from us here. There's a lot of shading on it, browns and yellows. And then the Persian to the right of the rearing horse has fallen to the ground, and he's actually raising his shield up here to kind of protect himself from being trampled. And we can see the man's terrified face actually reflected in his shield. So that's kind of interesting that they're doing that in this piece. And everywhere in the scene, men, animals, and weapons are casting shadows on the ground. So if we look at the ground, we can see shadows. It's kind of hard because parts of this are actually missing. And then the use of light is really an advanced technique that's becoming something that artists are using during the late classical. And there's a lot of drama and psychological intensity present in this scene as well. Alexander is riding his really famous, fearsome steed that he always rode into battle. And he is without a helmet, and he drives a spear through one of King Darius's trusted men. And Alexander is actually gazing at the Persian king and not at the man that he impales. So I believe this is Alexander. He's helmetless. He's actually killing another man right here, I believe. But he's looking right in King Darius's face as he does that. And Darius is actually calling for retreat, and the chariot is moving the king towards safety. So he's in a chariot right now. And Darius is actually looking back at Alexander, and he reaches out towards Alexander. And this mosaic is shown, and it's thought to be a Roman copy of a famous 4th century painting. And it does show us some of the techniques that they were probably using during the late classical period on Greek panel painting that no longer survives because it was done on wood. Let's see where we're at here. Okay, we still have some time. So we're going to take a look at some architecture from the late classical period. And the late classical period was really a time of innovation and experimentation in architecture. So Polyclethos the Younger, this is the aerial view of the theater looking southwest in Epidaurus, Greece, 350 BCE. So they think that this might be Polycletos's either grandson or one of his kin anyway. And this is one of the finest theaters from ancient Greece. This was constructed shortly after the birth of Alexander, and it's around kind of a semicircular shaped thing here, but the round area down here where the acting took place is called the orchestra which means dancing place. And at Epidaurus, an altar to Dionysus stood at the center of this circle. The spectators sit on a slope overlooking the orchestra, and the slope is called the theatron, or place of seeing. And then the wedge-shaped sections here are called cunei, and they are all combined together to create kind of a greater, slightly greater than a semicircle. And this theater could accommodate 12,000 spectators, so they could really pack them in. And they entered the seating area via a passageway between the seating area and the scene building called the skene. So the building would have been here, I believe, and then this would be a passageway, and then there'd be a passageway here. So kind of a narrow area at which the audience would make its way into the theater or leaving the theater. And then this would be the area where the actors would go backstage, basically. And it also served as a backdrop for plays. And this theater also had really amazing acoustics. Everyone should have been able to hear the actors no matter where they sat. So Theodoros of Phocaea, Tholos from Delphi, Greece, 375. This is a tholos much like the one that was near the theater we just looked at, that Polyclethos was the architect of. That one is in ruins today, so we're actually looking at a different one, but we can take a look at this tholos in Delphi and get an idea of what the one in Epidaurus looked like. And both had interior or exterior Doric columns, and you can see there's metopes up here in the frieze. So that's Doric. But both had an interior column or columns that had Corinthian capitals, which was an invention of the second half of the 5th century BCE. So we haven't seen this type of capital up until now. Greek architects did not embrace the Corinthian capital until the 2nd century BCE. And Corinthian capitals are usually only used for the interior of sacred buildings. So here's the Choragic monument of Lysicrates in Athens, Greece, 334 BCE. And this is the earliest use of a Corinthian capital on the exterior. And this is a Choragic monument by Lysicrates in Athens, Greece. Lysicrates had sponsored a chorus in a theatrical contest in 334 BCE, and his chorus actually ended up winning, and he erected this monument to commemorate his victory in the choir contest. And it's basically a cylindrical drum on a square base, and then engaged Corinthian columns are used around the drum. So engaged means that they're part of the fabric of the wall. They're not freestanding or completely in the round. And then the huge Corinthian capital sits on the top of the roof that once supported the trophy that he had won from the choir contest, basically. So here is the Corinthian capital from the Tholos at Epidaurus, which is in ruins, but they do have this Corinthian capital, and it's Polycletos the Younger, who is thought to be maybe a grandson of the original Polycletos. So this is actually from the ruined temple in Epidaurus, but it's, as you can see, the Corinthian capital is much more ornate than the Doric or even the Ionic capital, and it consists of a double row of acanthus leaves. So you can see there's two here. And then tendrils and flowers are present as well. So you can see all these tendrils. Here's some flowers here. And it's basically kind of a substitution for the Ionic order's volute or scroll-like capital. It's more decorative, much like the Ionic. And the form of it was actually inspired by a basket that had a tile on top of it. And the basket just so happened to have acanthus leaves growing from underneath it. So you can kind of see where the basket form with the tendrils coming up around it and the tile on top would have come from. And it was invented by the sculptor Callimachos during the second half of the 5th century BCE, and it didn't become popular until the Hellenistic and Roman times. So this doesn't come into play until later on. So if you see any kind of building with a Corinthian capital, you know that it's at least from the late classical period onward in Greek